I thought I knew my wife, until I found the second phone, the hidden lover, and a plan that didn't include me. That was the moment I stopped being her husband, and started becoming her reckoning. My name's Brian. I grew up in a small town with just my mom. She was the kind of woman who always had to be in control, and her presence dominated our little home. I was the youngest by a long shot. My oldest sister, Rachel, was 13 years ahead of me, and the middle one, Emily, was 10 years older. Honestly, I've always had this quiet feeling that I wasn't exactly planned, maybe even the reason my parents split. My dad walked out when I was 5 and just disappeared from our lives. School was rough. I was the quiet kid who got picked on a lot, and home wasn't much of a sanctuary either. All I ever really wanted was a bit of warmth from my mom, just some sign that she was proud of me, but that never came. Still, despite everything, I poured myself into schoolwork, kept my head down, and managed to push through. For 12 years, studying became my way of coping. Eventually, I got accepted to Kingston University, down in South London. It felt like a way out, an escape from everything that weighed me down back home. That's where I met Jenna. She had this striking look, carried herself with such poise and confidence. I was nothing like her, quiet, reserved, always unsure of myself. She, on the other hand, seemed to glow with life. With her flowing chestnut hair and deep brown eyes, she turned heads wherever she went. Jenna graduated with a degree in creative writing, while I stayed behind to finish my master's in mechanical engineering and design. I never had the nerve to talk to her, not seriously. Guys were always around her, the kind who lit up rooms and made people laugh. I figured she was out of my league. But then, at one of the university parties, one of her friends came over and started chatting with me, and before I knew it, Jenna joined us. For reasons I still don't quite understand, she seemed drawn to my quiet nature. My honesty, maybe. Eventually, I asked her to be my girlfriend. I was nervous, but she said yes. She was my first real relationship, my first everything, and I wasn't ashamed of that. But about 6 months in, whispers started floating around, people saying she was seeing other guys. I didn't have any proof, and I was too afraid to confront her. Jenna had always been spoiled, raised with a silver spoon thanks to her parents and her sister, Claire. That sense of entitlement bled into our relationship too. She had a fiery personality, loved the spotlight, and didn't mind making a scene in public, even if it left me feeling humiliated. But still, I loved her. It was the first time I'd ever really fallen for someone, and it hit me hard. After we graduated, we both found jobs and ended up renting a place together near Southampton, New Hampshire. Her family was originally from around there, and that's what pulled us to the area. Over time, I grew distant from what little family I had left. About a year after we settled into our life together, Jenna and I got married. It wasn't long before our first daughter, Sophie, came into the world, and a few years after that, we welcomed Eva. Parenthood suited Jenna, she embraced it fully, and for a while, everything felt just right between us. As time went on, my career started to gain momentum. I eventually landed a solid position at Walker Engineering. That was about a decade ago. With steady promotions and bonuses, we finally managed to put away enough money to dream bigger. Life was on an upward curve, and it felt good, until 2008 hit. The economic downturn that year knocked the wind out of a lot of us. Job losses, scaled-back contracts. It all meant longer hours, more stress, and no extra pay to show for it. While the girls were off at school and I was drowning in work, I uncovered something I never expected. Jenna had been unfaithful. She was seeing another man, someone we had both known from our university days. At first, I didn't want to believe it. I thought maybe it was just in my head, and I even suspected a former classmate who had recently moved nearby. When I finally confronted Jenna about my suspicions, she didn't deny it or try to explain. She laughed. Brushed me off like it was all just some joke. That crushed me more than I could admit at the time. Still, my job offered a kind of stability that became my anchor. I kept pushing forward, and eventually we were able to buy a beautiful home. Jenna was the one who pushed hard for a place that would reflect our status, whatever that meant to her. I had my doubts, but in the end I gave in. We bought a lovely 5-bedroom detached house in Southampton. The housing market worked in our favor, and we struck a great deal, though the mortgage was higher than I'd originally planned for. One choice I made around that time stands out as particularly smart, even in hindsight. I opened a new savings account, just in my name. Quietly, I funneled my share of the bonus money into it. Since I handled all the finances and was the primary earner, Jenna never even knew it existed. I think deep down, I needed a sense of security. Part of me feared what might happen if that old flame of hers came back into the picture. Luckily, the storm seemed to pass for a while, and life returned to something close to normal. My attention stayed where it mattered most, on Sophie and Eva. I made my daughter's education my top priority. Everything I did, every long hour at work, every choice I made, was to give them the kind of stability I never had growing up. Over the years, I stayed quiet about Jenna's betrayals. I kept it all bottled up, terrified that confronting her would shatter the family. I didn't want to be the reason Sophie and Eva grew to resent me, the way my own sisters came to despise our father. So I endured it. Her affairs, her arrogance, the silent cuts to my pride, I let it all slide because deep down I still loved her. As painful as it was to admit, I couldn't bear the thought of losing the life we had built together. That feeling, my refusal to let go, had deeper consequences than I realized. For one, it opened my eyes to just how much tension had brewed between Jenna and our daughters. I had underestimated their anger. They weren't just upset, they were quietly furious, and their bitterness toward her ran deeper than I'd ever imagined. Jenna, on the other hand, seemed unfazed. She carried on with the same confidence as if everything revolved around her. She made it clear, our relationship would continue on her terms, and she warned me not to rock the boat. The sad thing was she had a point. For 22 years I had stayed loyal. I always gave in, let her have the last word, did what she wanted. But now, the truth of her betrayal was undeniable, so obvious that even the people around us began to see me differently. It weakened my role as a father and as a man in my own household. The next morning at work, I walked into something that changed me. I crossed paths with Henry Walker, a name I hadn't thought much of until recently. He was somehow connected to Jenna. His question about how I was doing felt laced with meaning. And the way he looked at me, I knew. As I walked away, I heard laughter echo behind the closed door. They were laughing at me. That moment hit hard. I stood there in the hallway and it suddenly sank in, I didn't care about my job anymore. All those years I'd poured into this company, all the sacrifices I made, it felt hollow. I had been killing myself to provide, to support Jenna, and I realized I had unknowingly been funding her infidelity. The same woman who smiled at me every morning had been living a double life on my dime. And here I was, content with simple things. I didn't need luxury or recognition. I just wanted peace, a warm home, a family that loved one another. But that dream was built on a shaky foundation. Later that day I got a phone call from Rachel, my oldest sister. We hadn't spoken much over the years, but something made me answer. We talked for over an hour, and for the first time in a long while I found myself smiling. She was genuinely happy that I had started digging into the truth about our father. And she had stories, so many things I never knew. It turns out my mom had thrown our father out. She'd kept that truth hidden from me all these years. He didn't abandon us the way I thought, he was pushed away. Rachel told me he struggled with alcohol, yes, but he wanted to fix things. He wanted to come back. He died when I was just 11 and I never even knew. The official story was silence, but the truth was far more painful. My grandmother had always blamed Mom for the way his life unraveled, for his mental decline. And now, with everything happening, I couldn't help but wonder how much pain had been passed down without anyone acknowledging it. I got home around 8 that evening, emotionally drained but strangely more grounded. That's when I saw Jenna, standing in the hallway dressed to go out. When I saw Jenna getting ready to head out that night, I asked her casually where she was going. She didn't hesitate, told me she was meeting friends for a night out. But something in her tone felt off. I pressed her a little, and that's when I brought up Max, the man I believed she had been seeing behind my back. Her expression changed instantly. She pleaded with me not to mention his name, begged me to drop it. But there was no remorse in her eyes, no hint that my pain meant anything to her. I pleaded with her one last time to stay. I told her I wanted things to work, that I just wanted her to be my wife again, the woman I once fell in love with. She shook her head, telling me she was still my wife and always would be, as if the title alone meant anything anymore. Then she looked at me and asked me not to take her freedom away, not to deny her this plea for independence. She walked out the door, leaving me alone in a house that suddenly felt a whole lot colder. I stood there for a while, made myself a cup of coffee and sat in silence. For the first time, I let my thoughts wander to what life would look like without Jenna, and even without my daughters if it came to that. Surprisingly, the idea didn't crush me like I thought it would. It felt bearable. The next day I went to work with a new resolve. I refused to let the gossip or the sideways looks get to me. At 1 p.m. I had a meeting at the bank. I spent that time going over my finances, combing through every detail. It felt risky, but I knew I needed a clear picture if I was going to start over. The meeting went better than expected. I was able to close the personal savings account I had quietly maintained for years, and I also took steps to remove my name from the joint account Jenna and I had shared. It felt like an important turning point. The following day, I spoke to my supervisor about needing some time off. He didn't ask too many questions, just nodded and said it was fine. With some time on my hands, I started searching for a new place to live. I found a modest apartment not far from work, just 15 minutes from my daughter's and 5 minutes from the office. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I signed up for the tenant screening the very next day, right after a meeting with my advisor, Robert Williams. That evening I called an old friend, Toby Brown. We hadn't talked in a while, but I trusted him. I laid out the entire financial plan I had built over the years. I explained how, back in 2000, I had opened that separate savings account and had carefully deposited all my bonuses and extra income into it. It's what made it possible for me to qualify for a mortgage on my own without Jenna. Then I went into the bigger part of the plan, how Toby had helped me transfer the deed of our house to a new company we registered together through the land registry. It was a bold move, one I knew Jenna wouldn't see coming. Toby had his doubts about whether it was the right way to go, but I reassured him. I told him Jenna wouldn't be able to contest it. Her religious parents, I said, would be horrified if they knew the truth about her behavior. That's when my phone rang. I stepped out into the backyard to take the call. It was Toby. He confirmed the money transfer had gone through without any hiccups. That news was a relief. I felt ready to take the next steps, no hesitation, no more waiting. The following morning I wasted no time. I headed straight to the bank, where I was shown into the office of a mortgage specialist. Less than an hour later it was done. The mortgage was completely paid off, and I had closed every single one of my accounts there. No more ties. I walked a few doors down and opened a new bank account at another branch, one that Jenna would never know about. For the first time in a long while, I felt a quiet sense of security. As long as she didn't drag me to court, I wouldn't owe her a single cent more. The next day, I went to a car dealership to handle a few personal matters. The folks there were helpful, didn't ask too many questions, which suited me just fine. That evening when I returned home, I found Jenna sitting alone at the kitchen table. She looked worn out, eyes sunken with dark circles, her face pale. It was obvious she'd been crying. Concerned, I asked what was wrong. She hesitated, then told me she had been diagnosed with mononucleosis. I don't know what came over me, but I laughed. Not a cruel laugh, just a sad, exhausted kind of chuckle at how ridiculous everything had become. Jenna didn't find it funny. She shot me a sharp look, but I didn't back down. I told her to make sure she took her medication and looked after herself. But I also couldn't resist pointing out that, in many ways, she had brought all this chaos on herself. Her response was as bitter as I'd expected. She said that once she recovered, she was certain she'd find someone else who'd be happy to sleep with her. She claimed she had time to make up for. I looked around the room, almost in disbelief at how things had come full circle. It had taken longer than I expected, but the cold reality of our relationship had finally surfaced, stripped of illusions. Any guilt I felt on that Friday night had faded, replaced by years, decades, of quietly stored resentment. In the past, I might have caved to her guilt trips, her tears, her manipulations. But not anymore. Later that week, I walked into my manager's office. I had a discreet audio recorder tucked in my pocket, hidden just beneath the chair cushion. I knew about his Friday meetups with Olivia and wanted to gather proof. Not because I planned to expose him, but because I needed clarity, leverage, something of my own. He looked irritated the moment I walked in. Without any greeting, he came at me, demanding to know if I had already lined up another job. At first I stayed quiet. Then I admitted I hadn't found a new position yet. That smug grin spread across his face. I could see what he was thinking, that I'd come crawling back, begging for a second chance. But instead, I calmly asked about the salary I was still owed for the past month. That wiped the smirk off his face. I was done playing games. I had daughters to care for, a life to rebuild, and thankfully they were ready to stand by me as I figured it all out. I took my time that morning, knowing Jenna wouldn't be back until sometime after 2 in the afternoon. I carefully chose a few of my favorite photos, just me and the girls, moments that actually meant something, and packed them into the car. There wasn't much else I needed. I allowed myself a quiet moment with a cup of tea, just sitting there, thinking. The calm before the storm. I spent the next hour wrapping up loose ends. I disconnected the satellite TV and internet, made calls to British Gas and Southern Water to arrange for the utility services to be shut off. I knew it might take a few days to process everything, but that didn't worry me. I was moving on. Back in the bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the silence. That's when Jenna called. Her voice was sharp, panicked, like she'd finally realized I was serious. She asked if this was some kind of cruel joke. I didn't say a word. She demanded we talk when she got home, clearly rattled that the power had shifted. I stayed quiet. Her shouting became background noise as I stepped outside, struck a match, and set fire to what was left of us. I tore our marriage certificate into pieces, let it catch the flame, and watched it curl and blacken. I left a single photo, just one, on the kitchen table, the three of us smiling at Disneyland. I wondered if she ever looked at that day with real warmth, or if it was all just for show. Without looking back, I got in the car and drove away. Oddly, I didn't feel broken. I felt something closer to clarity. Maybe even peace. I knew the storm wasn't over, but at least I had stepped out of its eye. That Sunday, something shifted again, this time in my favor. Just a week after putting the house up for sale, I received two serious offers. One of them came in at £550,000, and I accepted it immediately. The deal began to move quickly, and I made sure Toby received his fair share for all the help he'd given me. I also tucked away a decent portion of the proceeds just in case. It felt good, like I was finally reclaiming control over my life. About a week later, Toby texted to say everything with the sale was moving fast. That message lifted something heavy off my chest. I wasted no time and arranged for a garbage removal service to clear out the last of what remained in the old house. Then came the confrontation. Jenna showed up, furious and completely unkempt. Her clothes looked like they belonged to her sister, baggy and wrinkled, and her hair was wild as if she hadn't slept in days. Her eyes burned with rage. "You're such an idiot," she screamed, lunging at me in a slap that missed by inches. She was unhinged, demanding retribution for what she saw as betrayal. I told her to calm down, offered to talk things over in the car. She blinked in surprise when she saw it, a brand new vehicle she hadn't seen before. She softened just enough to talk. She started telling me about her financial troubles, the debts she'd kept hidden, the life unraveling behind her confident mask. Then she actually begged me to come back. Said we could fix it, start over. I looked her in the eye and told her I didn't feel anything anymore. That was the truth. That's when her desperation turned to threat. She vowed to sue me, insisting she wouldn't leave this marriage empty-handed. She was certain I hadn't lost the house, certain I'd outmaneuvered her, and she was right. I stood my ground. Without raising my voice, I made it absolutely clear to Jenna, she wouldn't see a single penny from me. I told her face to face that I was prepared to fight for everything if she wanted to take this to war. I explained that she had no access to my financial information, and I had already put measures in place to make sure she wouldn't find anything easily. She looked like she wanted to argue more, but before she could say another word, we heard footsteps. It was our youngest, Eva, coming down the hall. Jenna froze mid-sentence. She quickly pulled herself together just as the water from the faucet hissed off. Eva stepped into the room, breaking the tension. About 15 minutes later, I watched from the window as Jenna prepared to leave. She was with a man, Trail. I recognized him from photos I had come across during my quiet investigation. They were about to leave when he leaned in for a kiss. But Jenna turned her head slightly, expertly dodging his lips to protect her fresh lipstick. "Let's stick to the plan first," she said with a soft smirk. "Then we can enjoy ourselves as much as we want." "Sorry, you're right," he replied. "It's just hard to resist your lips." His flirtation earned a radiant smile from her. Watching that exchange made something inside me go cold. Later that afternoon, Chris, was checking through the new car I had purchased. I opened the glove compartment to tuck in the updated registration papers. As I was about to close it, a nagging thought crossed my mind. Something playful at first. I opened it again. That's when I noticed it, the car manual, some loose papers, and then tucked in the back a burner phone. My stomach dropped. I muttered under my breath as I stared at it, realizing this wasn't just a coincidence. Jenna had been upstairs every Saturday morning like clockwork, showering. It all started to make sense. She had been living a double life, and what was worse, she didn't even seem conflicted about it. Even with the occasional flicker of guilt, she carried herself like someone who believed she was thriving. To her, the affair wasn't a betrayal, it was a way to make her life more fulfilling. She saw no shame in having intimate relationships with two men in the same day. In fact, she seemed to take pride in it. She would spend time with Trail during the day, then come home, clean herself up, and prepare to be intimate with me in the evening, as if nothing had happened. It made me feel sick to think how many nights I had shared a bed with her, completely unaware of what she was doing just hours before. That same day, my friend Bob's lawyer managed to squeeze me into his schedule, outside of normal hours. I appreciated it more than I could express. We started preparing everything, and just a few days later, on Wednesday, something I had quietly hoped for finally happened. Jenna, still pretending to be in control, was blindsided. She had just returned from a date with Trail and was at the hospital for a checkup when she was handed the divorce papers. Right there in the waiting room, her world began to unravel. Jenna never really saw it coming. She had spent so long ignoring my unhappiness, brushing off every sign of emotional distance, that when the divorce papers landed in her hands, right on schedule, she didn't even catch the cruel irony. While she sat there trying to make sense of what was happening, the possibility that I had uncovered her affair with Trail didn't seem to register with her at all. Back at home, things were tense. We were arguing again. Nothing explosive, just that sharp, low kind of tension that cuts deeper than yelling. She accused. I responded. I remember her snapping at me in frustration, as if I was the one tearing the family apart. But then, everything stopped when our 2 children, Josh and Kayla, came down the stairs. Their wide, anxious eyes said everything. We had tried to keep things private, but kids are perceptive. They had heard more than we intended. I'm sorry you had to hear that, I told them, my voice calm but heavy. We're going through something really tough right now. Your mom and I are heading for a divorce. But I want you to understand this. We both love you deeply. And none of this is your fault. Not even a little. Josh and Kayla nodded, clearly trying to make sense of it all. After a moment, they quietly headed back to their rooms. Just before disappearing down the hallway, Josh turned and said, "We're here for you, Dad. We'll talk, but maybe it's best not to be a target, if you know what I mean." That hit me hard. "Thanks, buddy," I said, grateful for his strength even in a moment like that. That night, we followed our usual routine as best we could. After dinner, we all drifted to our corners of the house. Normally, we'd gather in the living room for a movie or a show, unless the kids had homework, but this time the energy was different. Jenna sat alone, flipping through a book in the living room, while I made my way to the den and turned on Jeopardy! It was a small slice of normal, and I caught myself smiling quietly at how familiar it all still felt even now. Meanwhile, things between Jenna and Trail were evolving behind the scenes. She claimed she didn't want to replace me, not entirely. She said what she shared with Trail was different, less about emotional intimacy and more physical. Trail, for his part, seemed perfectly content with that arrangement. He liked his freedom, the casual rhythm of their affair, and he had only one condition. He wanted to start seeing her twice a week instead of just once. At first, Jenna hesitated. But within a month she gave in. They began meeting on Saturdays for lunch at a tucked-away restaurant they frequented. Trail would play the part, pretending to understand her struggles at home, nodding sympathetically while she poured out her half-truths. And then there was the confession, the one I'll never forget. "I still love you, Chris," she said to me one night, voice low and trembling. "I love you and I need you. You're my husband, the father of my children. You take up most of my heart. But I also love Trail, in a different way. It's not the same kind of love, but it's still real. He's not part of our family, so I can only give him what's left of my time." She said it like it made sense, as if dividing love up between 2 men could somehow be fair to anyone. "He wants more," Jenna told me one evening, her tone matter-of-fact as if she were reporting the weather. "He's accepted the arrangement for now, but if you really love me like you say you do, you'd acknowledge your place in all this, with grace." She said it without looking at me, her head tilted down, ashamed, or maybe just pretending to be. Then she added, "What if I let you have a little fun on the side? Would that make everything okay?" I looked at her, stunned. "You just don't get it," I said quietly. "I never wanted an arrangement. I wanted it to be just you and me." A week later, that conversation still haunted me, but it wasn't the only thing eating at me. Some relatives asked me about the divorce, about what had happened between Jenna and me. They'd heard bits and pieces, likely from our daughter. And while they had every right to know, especially since I'd always treated Jenna's parents like my own, calling them mom and dad, I just couldn't bring myself to explain. There was too much shame in the truth. That following Monday, when Jenna stayed the night with Trail, he pulled out all the stops. For the first time since they'd been together, he prepared a full dinner. Well, technically he ordered in from his favorite Italian place, but he set the table, lit candles, and had everything ready by the time she got back from work. "Wow. Candles and everything? That's really sweet, Trail," she said, genuinely surprised. Throughout the meal, he played her favorite classical music softly in the background. She looked across the table, watching him with something like admiration. For a fleeting moment, she remembered how I had always preferred classic rock, gritty guitars and raspy voices, not orchestras and symphonies. She smiled at the difference, then pushed the thought away. She told herself it was just a generational gap. Still, despite everything, Jenna hadn't yet introduced our children to Trail. They knew of him, of course. Kids aren't blind. But she kept her interactions with him minimal during her custodial weeks, just the occasional midday text or call while they were at school. She wasn't ready to have him around them. Not yet. Then came Wednesday. That day Jenna tried reaching Trail but he didn't respond. No calls, no texts. Silence. Later she confronted me, out of the blue, emotions all over the place. "What did you do?" she demanded, visibly shaken. "Chris, what did you do?" I blinked, caught off guard. "Do? I haven't done anything." "Nice try," she snapped. "Trail is furious, hurt, and when the authorities find out what you've done you'll pay for it." Her words were sharp, her voice shaking, not from confidence but from fear. Fear that maybe, just maybe, the walls she had built around her new life were starting to crumble. "I'm not going to calm down," Jenna snapped, her voice tight with warning. "Don't expect me to just swallow this." "Whatever you say," I replied quietly, refusing to rise to her level. Then I ended the conversation, still baffled by what exactly had triggered her outburst. She was clearly shaken but I couldn't connect the dots. Later, she admitted that she had been bothered by how composed I'd been, how unbothered I looked. She said it felt like I was wearing a mask, playing innocent, and it made her question how long I'd been pretending. For a moment she caught herself wondering, when did Chris get so good at faking things? Jenna told herself she might apologize to me, eventually, but she wasn't about to ask for permission for the life she was building on the side. And then came Delman. Delman Lear was almost as tall as Trail, but with a more refined presence. He had grown up in New Orleans, and his voice was a smooth blend of Cajun warmth and classic Southern charm. At 25 he was younger than Jenna, more polite than Trail, and noticeably less aggressive in his approach. He worked as a junior manager at a local firm. The two of them met by chance in line at a Starbucks a few months back. From the first moment, Jenna had wondered if Delman might be capable of giving her something Trail couldn't. Something steadier, maybe even sweeter. Meanwhile, back in my world I was sitting in the car outside a gym, finishing my second Bavarian cream donut of the morning. I had followed a hunch, and that hunch paid off. There he was, a young, muscular man, shirtless and in gym shorts, walking up to Jenna and planting a warm kiss on her lips. I watched from the distance. "She really does have a thing for younger guys," I murmured to myself. Then I picked up my phone and tapped the screen a few times. Within moments I had a name. I smirked. "Thanks, Google," I whispered. Later that week, Trail was at his office when something unexpected happened. He was at the urinal when his knees buckled suddenly, sharp, searing pain shooting through his lower back and legs. Gripping the walls, he barely made it back to his desk. Gasping and drenched in sweat, he managed to call his doctor, explaining the situation. The doctor didn't hesitate. "Come in immediately," he said with concern. Trail obeyed. After a quick injection and a round of medication, he started to feel more stable. The nurse returned shortly afterward with a notepad and pen in hand. "We need the names and contact information of everyone you've been in close contact with recently," she said gently. Trail blinked, realizing this wasn't just about pain. It was about something far more serious.